Hey everybody, this is Zachary Jeans. Let's keep walking through this Bible. So today is episode 447 and we are in 2 Kings. We're going to be looking at 2 Kings chapter 8, and there's a few stories in there that sort of highlight Elisha's ministry in Israel and to neighboring nations, and then actually to the people. We're going to see a return of the Shunammite woman and some advice that he gives her. We see a foreign king, son of a king, and Elisha's very sobering reaction to him in his question, and some changing of power in other places. Gehazi is going to show back up, even though we've already read about the story where Gehazi turns leprous when he tries to run after Naaman and get some cash for the ministry. When he was told not to. So there's a lot in here, and we're going to get into it. 2 Kings chapter 8. If you would, take a minute, and I appreciate every time you share. Take the boldness to share this word out. You know, just the other day, I was talking with someone who I didn't think took time to watch these, Bible studies with me. And they mentioned some details that only a person who did watch, or at least get the notification of these Bible studies, would know. So yeah, you just don't know. We don't know what people, how they process their spirituality and their time with God. So if you would, take time, share, and hit that little like button. Sometimes that'll help surface these things into other people's feeds. So, okay, why don't we stop and get a sip of coffee here. Oh, that's good. All right, and let's pray. Let's just ask God for help. Lord, I love you. God, thanks for your word. God, thanks for letting me get into your word. Thank you for letting me teach your word. Thank you for teaching me your word. And Lord, I know I'm going to probably get some things wrong, but help me get more than I get wrong. Help me get right, and help me pass on the things that need to be said, and restrict the things that should not be. Lord, I lay all this at your feet. It's in your name I pray, Jesus. Amen. All right. Now you can hit that pause button and go listen to 2 Kings chapter 8 if you want, or you can listen to me read. All right, let's pick it up. Verse 1. Now Elisha had said to the woman whose son he had restored to life, "Arise and depart with your household, and sojourn wherever you can, for the Lord has called for a famine, and it will come upon the land for 7 years." So the woman arose and did according to the word of the man of God. She went with her household and sojourned in the land of the Philistines 7 years. And at the end of the 7 years, when the woman returned from the land of the Philistines, she went to appeal to the king for her house and her land. Now the king was talking with Gehazi, the servant of the man of God, saying, "Tell me all the great things that Elisha has done." And while he was telling the king how Elisha had restored the dead to life, behold, the woman whose son he had restored to life appealed to the king for her house and her land. And Gehazi said, "My lord, O king, here's the woman, and here is her son, whom Elisha restored to life." And when the king asked the woman, she told him. So the king appointed an official for her, saying, "Restore all that was hers, together with all the produce of the fields from the day that she left the land until now." All right. So we have the Shunammite woman coming back, and I have a couple cats off camera letting each other know how they feel. So they're barking at each other over there. Don't mind them. They're working it out. All right. So Elisha rose this woman's, he felt terrible, right? Remember all that? Felt just terrible. One, prophesied that she'd have a son in the first place when she was not going to have kids. Has the kid a few years later or whatever, The kid's out with dad in the fields, and next thing you know, he's getting sick. Everybody speculates, was it heat stroke or whatever, but the kid dies. And this woman is just devastated. She's like, I didn't need a kid to start with. I was already past that, and now you gave me one, and now God's taking him away. So she's just like, just devastated. And then so Elisha sends Gehazi, and Gehazi isn't able to raise the kid, with his staff and whatnot. He ends up going there, and he does this whole visual process of laying on top of the kid and breathing into his mouth, and my life or your life sort of thing. And God comes around and heals the kid through Elisha, brings him back from the dead. Well, the king's taking a second here, years and years later, after a horrific famine that has moved through Israel, and this woman has gone to live in a foreign land. Elisha had said, get out of town, take everything you got, all your people, get out. I don't want to do this again. And saves her, delivers her. Well, in her absence, somebody took over her stuff. And she comes back and needs it restored. In Israel, this is how the law works. This is how stuff happens. And she's making at least a claim. And the point I want to make here isn't about the famine, isn't about the whole story about, the compassion of Elisha and God to, save this one family. There's lots of stories in here that we could unpack. I think it's just interesting, God's timing. Gehazi didn't know he was getting called into the king on a day to tell stories about probably, I can't really think of a more miraculous miracle. I can't think of a more poignant moment in Elisha's ministry than when he literally brought somebody back from the dead. And he's sharing that story to the king, and then lo and behold, God walks this woman in after her time of sojourning, after technically the amount of time that Elisha told her to take off, right? Get out of here for 7 years, and syncs it all up into the exact moment. That's God. That's when you know God is tapping on your shoulder. Aside from the miracles themselves, or the answered prayers, if you will, right? Where you're like, Lord, I need to understand this thing, or I need help with this other thing. And then God does it, and you're like, hey, I talked to God, and God is the only one that could have done that. And, he worked it out. There are those other times when, out of nowhere, completely unexpected, God shows up in these coincidences, and you couldn't have planned them. It totally ties into who the Lord is and what he's doing, and he shows up. And so we see the invisible God show up in a visible world through circumstance and through his appointed times, his appointed people. And it's not wrong to look for those. Now, you can't bank your life on these moments. You can't plan them. I would hesitate to say that many people, myself included at times, wants those. It's a exciting thing to see God show up. But when the king is literally asking Gehazi, tell me everything about what Elisha's done. Like, I want to hear all the stories. And telling the story of a kid being raised from the dead, and the woman walks in, like in person. And how much more did that help her case? What if Gehazi wasn't there? And she shows up and she makes a claim, and he's like, we just went through the most gutting famine of, my entire life. This city, people were eating babies, and, it was horrible, right? Or whatever. he might told her to, well, look, yeah, the law might be with you, but look around. This place is devastated. And you want your plot of land? You bailed? You went to a foreign land? You went to our enemies? No. But in this moment, he's talking to Gehazi and sharing about this moment of reality where somebody came back from the dead, and that person walks in and says, yeah, here I am. Here's me and my son. And why are you here? Well, I left to avoid the famine. You know, the prophet told me to leave, and here I am, and somebody's taken over my land. They've stolen it. And now she gets her stuff back. And not only her stuff back, but all the produce of all the previous 7 years, which probably isn't much with famine in town, in the land, but it's something nonetheless, right? So that moment, because it's all set up that way by God, is the thing that saves her, empowers the faith of the king, who's just gone through this gutting reality with this kingdom. Not a great king, but king nonetheless. Gehazi is there on God's appointed circumstance and his timing, and he walks her in, and because of this confluence, she gets her stuff back. Any other way this pans out, probably not happening. So Elisha is able to protect her and her son and this family by sending her out and bringing her back, and bringing her back exactly at the moment and the circumstances that aligns with God's will to make sure she gets her stuff back and she's not living destitute in poverty on her return. All right, let's pick it up in verse 7. Now we're going to read about a treacherous son. Now Elisha came to Damascus. Ben-hadad, the king of Syria, was sick. Now we remember Ben-hadad. He's shown up in these stories quite a bit. And when it was told him, the man of God has come here, the king said to Hazael, that's his son, take a present with you and go meet the man of God and inquire of the Lord through him, saying, shall I recover from this sickness? So Hazael went to meet him and took a present with him, all kinds of goods of Damascus, 40 camel loads. When he came and stood before him, he said, your son, Ben-hadad, king of Syria, has sent me to say to you, shall I recover from this sickness? And Elisha said to him, go, say to him, you shall certainly recover, but the Lord has shown me that he shall certainly die. And he fixed his gaze and stared at him until he was embarrassed. And the man of God wept. And Hazael said, why does my Lord weep? He answered, because I know the evil that you will do to the people of Israel. You will set on fire their fortresses, and you will kill their young men with the sword, and dash in pieces their little ones, and rip open their pregnant women. And Hazael said, what is your servant, who is but a dog, that he should do this great thing? Elisha answered, the Lord has shown me that you are to be king over Syria. Then he departed from Elisha and came to his master, who said to him, what did Elisha say to you? And he answered, he told me that you would certainly recover. But the next day he took the bedcloth and dipped it in water and spread it over his face till he died. And Hazael became king in his place. Horrific story here. I want to focus in on something though, aside from the fact that his son basically murders his dad. Now the Hebrew here, every Bible translation, you're probably looking at yours, says it's uncertain. All the context here essentially going along with the way Elisha says, like, hey, you're going to get better from your sickness, but someone else is going to be king. It's going to be the son, and how all that works out we just read. And so that's how they kind of take the unknown Hebrew words and they're like, you know, this kind of sounds like this and this kind of sounds like that. And I guess it sort of jives with the earlier part of the text, which says that, this is going to happen and that's going to happen. That's how they get the whole idea that this is actually talking about him essentially being suffocated. Dear old dad. I want to focus in here on Elisha's reaction. Okay. And maybe we don't just fly past it and talk about this transference of power and things like that. It says here in verse 11, this is when Elisha is talking to Hazael. And he tells him what's going to happen. And it says, and he fixed his gaze and stared at him until he was embarrassed. Awkward, right? He's just staring at him. He's told him what's going to happen. And of course, we just get what? This much text, like, a couple sentences. Clearly, there's a conversation. Let me tell you some stuff that's going to happen. There's a little more color around the conversation than two sentences that we get in this, book. But, back in the day, it was parchment. It's precious stuff. So, you aren't writing huge novels on every single conversation. So we just get a few sentences, but there's obviously, with 40 camels showing up and a big pomp and circumstance and one nation coming to address Elisha the prophet, there's a lot of conversation here. We don't get all that. We just get the sum of it, which is, you're going to go tell him he's going to recover, but the Lord has shown me that he shall certainly die. And Elisha just stares at him. And there's this long, awkward moment where Elisha is gazing, just staring almost at and through Hazael, the king's son. And it's this pregnant pause, this awful, long, awkward moment. And tears just start to come off the prophet's face. And this is disturbing. The mood has completely changed. If you think of the moments of the presentation of walking up and addressing Elisha, and Hazael even refers to his dad, the king. He says, he's your son, in this moment of superior respect. And you get this moment of conversation where they're talking and he's sharing the word of the Lord. And then there's this complete flip and change. And it's so disturbing. Hazael asks him, why is my Lord weeping? Why are you crying? And Elisha answers him, because I know the evil that you'll do to the people of Israel. Elisha is seeing, in reality, a vision of what is going to happen through the life of Hazael to Israel. Now, this not necessarily not God's judgment. Sorry, too many negatives. This could be God's judgment. More often than not, when God allows a foreign nation to attack and dominate Israel, regardless of the terrible leadership or good leadership, it is a judgment. It is an attempt to show that God is God, and that Israel, who's gone astray, is choosing poorly. And it comes with huge, devastating consequences, usually by a foreign power. And Elisha is standing there looking, and it's just hitting him like waves of reality. And again, we just get a few sentences. You will set on fire their fortresses. Do you think that's 6, 7 words there? One, two, three, four, five, six. 6 words. You will set on fire their fortresses. It's just 6 words. But Elisha is seeing like so much. He's hearing something from the Lord. He is seeing a reality that could fill books. At least a movie script, right? And then it says, and you will kill their young men. He's watching. You will kill their young men with the sword. He's watching this reality. He's hearing this from the Lord, right? And it's so gutting and it's so hurtful. And he might even see in this vision faces or places that he knows really well. But more than anything, he just bears the burden of knowing a God that has helped him raise somebody from the dead. He knows a God who has helped, not at this point, but because all these stories are kind of out of order chronologically, but he knows a God who can turn Naaman from a leper into a guy with baby skin, right? And then turn his servant, obviously not at this moment, but turn his servant, from a healthy, helpful guy, into a bit of a traitorous dog who becomes a leper himself. He's a God who is seeing Elijah stop it raining for 3.5 years. He is a guy who has seen God work. He's heard God speak. He has empowered his servants, to save axe heads that should be on the bottom of the river, come floating up to the top. This is a guy who knows God, and he doesn't doubt God. And he sees things that are happening in a very visual way, in a very meaningful way, as he's staring at this guy, and God is just showing him this reality, and it crushes him. It breaks his heart. And I don't know if there have been times in your life where you kind of see a situation and you're like, oh no, I see how this is going. These people don't see how this is going. Like, it could be at work where you're like maybe on a sales call and everybody's all jacked up because they think you're going to close a deal or something, and you've just been in the game too long, or you just hear something in the other side, the voice of the other people, and you're like, no, this is going to go a different way. And actually, if it goes a different way, it's going to take this, people are going to lose their jobs here. Or maybe it's something in the family. Maybe you just kind of listen to a family member and they're saying one thing about their health, and you're like, I don't think they're doing well. And then lo and behold, that person skips out and they die. And you saw it, but it's not like you could say anything. Sometimes people have that. It could be something geopolitically. Maybe you pay attention to news a lot. And you're just like, there's no way to explain this to everybody in my life. Nobody wants to hear it, first of all. And even if I try to, how do you put all these pieces together for somebody who doesn't agree with your observations or premises? But lo and behold, you see something coming. And it's just overwhelming. We all have insight into stuff. And perhaps God's giving you a dream or a vision, right? And showing you something that's coming or could come. And it's just so devastating that it overwhelms you. Well, imagine having that times 100, right? Whatever little intuitions that you've been given, or spiritual glimpses through a dream or through just an insight into a moment. Imagine that being sort of movie length reality crunched into, 2 or 3 minutes, staring at an oppositional son of a king who is going to take authority and power and then come back and just absolutely destroy everyone you love around you. That's what Elisha's going through at this moment. And I don't think he's crying because he's scared. He's just devastated by the absolute unequivocal reality. There's no changing it. There's nothing that he's experiencing. He knows this is coming. And God shows him, and he tells this guy, and lo and behold, he goes back home. Dad seems to be turning a corner. The kid's like, the prophet told me, I think I'm going to make something else happen here. I thought he was just going to die on his own. We're going to have to help him along. Yeah, it's pretty rough. All right, verse 16. In the 5th year of Joram, the son of Ahab, king of Israel, when Jehoshaphat was king of Judah, Jehoram, the son of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, began to reign. He was 32 years old when he became king, and he reigned 8 years in Jerusalem. So 32 to 40, math. And he walked in the way of the kings of Israel, as the house of Ahab had done. For the daughter of Ahab was his wife, and he did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. Yet the Lord was not willing to destroy Judah. Why? For the sake of David, his servant, since he promised to give a lamp to him and his sons forever. And that promise is, really ultimately the promise by which Jesus Christ, the Savior, comes through the line of David. And there is a lamp forever, literally forever. In his days, Edom revolted from the rule of Judah and set up a king of their own. And Joram passed over to Zair with all his chariots and rose by night, and he and his chariot commanders made war with him, but his army fled home. So Edom revolted from the rule of Judah to this day. Then Libnah revolted at the same time. Now the rest of the acts of Joram and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? Yeah, they are. Rhetorical question. So Joram slept with his fathers and was buried with his fathers in the city of David. And Ahaziah, his son, reigned in his place. Just a note, Edom is Esau, Jacob and Esau. These are the descendants of Esau. And Esau himself married around and, intermixed with the peoples of the land. And so the people of Edom, who generally lived in the hill country, always sort of had the high ground whenever Judah and Israel would attack or fight back and forth. They were always in a strong position. And some people trace the line of Edom all the way down to King Herod and stuff like that. At least that's what I've heard. I don't know. Every time I look at that stuff, in history, I'm always just take it with a grain of salt. Okay. Sometimes there's a direct lineage. If it's not in the Bible, then you kind of go, well, there's a lot of evidence, but I don't know, But regardless, Edom, Esau, always been at odds with his brother, Jacob, Israel. In the 12th year of Joram, the son of Ahab, king of Israel, Ahaziah, the son of Jehoram, king of Judah, began to reign. Ahaziah, I always Ahaziah, but Ahaziah was 22 years old when he began to reign, so young buck. And he reigned 1 year in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Athaliah, and she was a granddaughter of Omri, king of Israel. He's a bad dude. He also walked in the way of the house of Ahab and did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, as the house of Ahab had done. For he was a son-in-law of the house of Ahab. Ahab and Jezebel and all this. He went with Joram, the son of Ahab, to make war against Hazael, king of Syria, at Ramoth Gilead. And the Syrians wounded Joram. And King Joram returned to be healed in Jezreel of the wounds that the Syrians had given him at Ramah, when he fought against Hazael, king of Syria. And Ahaziah, the king of Joram, king of Judah, went down to see Joram, the son of Ahab, in Jezreel because he was sick. Okay, so we're going to put a pause in this, but we're leading into some of the consequences that Elisha just declared to Hazael, the son of Ben-hadad, the king of Syria. Yeah, your dad's going to get well, but he's not going to make it because, well, his kid's going to come and Hazael is going to take him out. And you're going to come and you're going to wreak horrific havoc upon Israel. So that's what we're setting up here. And Elisha's word is beginning to come past here. It also makes the point that the leadership of Israel and Judah is pretty horrific. And they are worshiping false gods and temple prostitutes and Ashtoreth poles and high places and sacrificing kids and all kinds of horrible things. And yet God loves his people and he persists in allowing them to survive, but be rebuffed in horrific ways by foreign nations, that they might turn and seek him. And ultimately that salvation will be through the house of David, and that there will be a lamp that lasts forever. And we have the benefit of being hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, obviously, after this, knowing that Jesus fulfilled that promise and that he promised to return and set up his kingdom forever. So we are looking for that Messiah. Israel today continues to look for a Messiah because obviously they didn't accept Christ, many of them. Though I think you should note that many Jews have. And Jesus himself was a Jew, and so was Paul and Peter. And there have been people who are Jewish who have accepted Christ throughout the centuries, and will tomorrow somebody will accept Christ who is Jewish and Israeli. And so I see a lot of hate towards Israel right now in the news, and in particular also Jewish people. And I think that, you know, there can be sins committed by nations that will in fact cause them to be judged just like any other nation. Our nation, your nation, someone else's nation. These nations rise and they fall and they face consequences for their actions, whether or not the people were totally behind them or not. And so I would caution anyone right now who is having really hard feelings about Israel as a nation to just remember that this book their book, the Old Testament, which we're reading out of, is full of transparency and a testimony of self-inflicted wounds, of evils performed by leadership. And so it's really a humbling spiritual book, because it could write history. They always say, you know, the victors write history in such a way that makes them look good. And one of the reasons why the Old Testament and the New Testament, the Bible itself, is so trustworthy is it doesn't hide the sins of its authors, of its peoples that it's describing. And that's why when it says that Jesus didn't sin, we can trust that he didn't sin, because if he did, the Bible was pretty consistent through all its authors, all its 40 plus authors over, you know, depending on how you count it out, 1600 years. Pretty self-deprecating, because it's describing, yeah, this king was pretty horrible. This leader was pretty horrible. This person did awful things. This is how God dealt with them. Peter denying Christ on the day that he's pulled in by the Sadducees and Pharisees. And like, in other words, you can trust when it says, yeah, you know, there's this one guy who was promised to come, who came, who didn't sin. If he did, the Bible will be pretty honest about that. I don't know where you're at with life, but you don't have to be perfect. You aren't. And you can talk to God, and if God shows you stuff about your life that you need to tell him, you can. And he knows. He already knows. Just like Elisha knew when he was talking to Hazael. He sees the whole thing, except perfectly. And you can fess up to him, and he'll hear you. And you can trust in the one who didn't sin, the one who is the eternal lamp, right? The eternal king in Jesus. Because he'll give you all his good, he'll take all your bad. All right, let's stop here, but I'm going to encourage you to keep walking, okay? God bless you. Bye-bye.